Shame me with lunch detention? Joke's on you, I will sit here forever. Had forgotten about this story until the other day when I was chatting with a friend I went to high school with. It's silly, but I think it fits. It was the late 90s, I was still wearing too much flannel and continuing my historical trend of keeping books from the library much too long. I had a paper due for my sophomore global studies class, so I naturally took out more books than I could read, wrote the essay, and completely forgot about the books piled in the corner of my bedroom. After a series of overdue slips sent to my homeroom, I eventually did return the 4 or 5 book one sunny afternoon in the anonymous drop book during a study period. Promptly moved on to bigger and better things. About 2 weeks later, I was called down to the assistant principal's office in that space of time before classes officially started that was reserved for one thing and one thing only. The reprobates and delinquents were in trouble. I walked the halls thinking that surely this was just a timing mishap and I was being summoned to receive congratulations for some kind of award I didn't know I had entered into competition for. Yup, he just wants to prepare me for the surprise ticker tape parade. I was wholly unprepared to hear that I was receiving lunch detention, to start immediately, because I had not returned a single book, that I still remember was slim and had a white and red cover, from my GS paper research. I tried to argue that there was a mistake, since I was sure, like I am sure that I have fingertips, that I had returned it, but he could not be moved, and I was sentenced to indefinite lunch detention until I either returned the book or paid the $16 to replace it. I left the office, late for first period, defeated, but kept my head held high at lunch later that day as I walked past the entirety of cafeteria, which held a couple hundred of my peers. Plastic food tray in hand, I went down the hall to the old shop classroom that had since been moved and the awaiting detention. I checked in with Mrs. Brown at her desk in front and took an inconspicuous seat in the back. Staring down at my canned peach slices, I braced for the worst. A murderous ruckus was going to break out any minute, I could tell, but once my ears stopped ringing, I discovered that it was really a calm escape from the crowded and rowdy lunchroom. I ate slowly that day, enjoyed my young thoughts in blissful quiet, and wondered what kind of heaven was this. To be fair, I did search far and wide for that book that first day. Attempts to find it in my locker, bedroom, and backpack were fruitless, and the general consensus in my home was that the school was being ridiculous. I certainly wasn't going to pay for something I didn't lose. So, the next day, considering my brief brush with the law and the invisible stain already attached to my reputation, I went armed with a book and my lunch past the maddening crowds to the detention room. I sat there, day after day, for nearly 2 months of lunches. In retrospect, to this day those remain some of the most relaxing lunch breaks of my life. I had around 40 solid minutes to recharge in, mostly, complete silence with my reasonably priced lunch and whatever book I was currently reading. I had to recount my origin story a few times, since no one could figure out how the quiet bookworm of a girl who had never been in trouble before had landed in the wilds of detention, but I was mostly left to my own devices in this newly found peaceful retreat. I was friendly with Mrs. Brown, who had worked for the district of my small town since I was in elementary school, and even hooked her up with a sweet horse whisper poster that she loved from my family's mom and pop video store. She must have felt bad for me, because somewhere around the 1-month mark, she started up a collection to cover the cost of the book. She added the initial donation, but teachers who would stop by to chit-chat would add loose change to it, and race to buy my freedom was on. After a few weeks she handed me just under $7. My love of solitude was no match for the guilt of carrying around that money or my mom who had just started a new job in the school district. So with a heavy heart I paid in full for the missing book and went back to my old lunch table in the thick of the action. Months later, during the last week of school, I was called down to the library at my convenience and with sweaty palms forced myself to face the music over what was inevitably going to be yet another overdue book at the end of the day. Well, lo and behold, the end-of-year inventory check had located the book as waylaid in the wrong section of the library. I received a few sheepish looks from the librarians as they refunded the money and apologized in a backward way that still made me the bad guy, as overdue books are the real blemish on one's character. So how were they to assume that I didn't lose the book? Remember my mom's new job in the school? Well, she just happened to be walking by the library just as I was finishing up, and to say that she laid into them is far too extreme sounding, but she did scold some stern-faced librarians into giving me a proper apology. She also demanded that they look into reforming their system and, my favorite part, take the proper measures to expunge my record. She was very concerned about me carrying around the albatross of false accusation apparently. And just like that, my life of crime was over. TLDR, got lunch detention thanks to a missing library book, discovered I loved it, intended to sit there the rest of my high school career until the teacher running detention took up a collection to get me out. Book was found in the library and my mom chastised women who were likely as old as time itself. Now to the comments. Too bad you couldn't stay there, OP, my high school self equally decorated in plaid is jealous. Yeah, if that was the punishment I would have held onto that book till the end of the year. I always hated lunch because I never had anyone I genuinely wanted to sit with. I was a nerd/computer geek, but I couldn't stand the BS nerds talked about like weird cartoons or whatever. I also was into sports but not enough to sit with the jocks. I usually sat by myself and read a programming book hoping the school bully didn't see me to accidentally hit me in the head with his tray. But this was in the early 90s. We were all awkward back then. I don't miss it. Good things she got your record expunged. Those things are permanent. Yep. I didn't get into MIT because of my 7th grade lunch detention, at least that's what I tell myself/s. Good to know I wasn't the only one. Reminds me of my 10-year-old. He much prefers the office to the classroom, friendly adults, and a good book. I had to beg him to stop purposefully getting booted from class to read because there are other things in class he's missing. Though I can't say I'm upset he loves to read this much, and the ladies at the office absolutely adore him and complain to me quietly when he's been away too long, lol. My son is the same way. He takes after his mom. I ate lunch in a teacher's classroom, that I never had until my senior year, every day of high school. I miss our awkward lunch bunch. I have a few students who come and have lunch in my class to get away from the crowds. I love letting them have a quiet place. I am equally pleased with both the story and your wonderful writing style. Gotta agree, I was enthralled throughout. Something like this happened to me way back at a public library and I was blamed when I was sure that I had returned a copy of a travel book on time. They berated me for days and basically tried to extort late fines out of me to the point where I actually thought my idiot son might have lost or hidden the book or something. It turns out I didn't need to beat him to within an inch of his life with a set of my favorite jumper cables, as the book was actually at the bottom of the book returns chute and they hadn't realized. Boy, were they embarrassed the next time I went in. How's your boy? What's his name? Roger. I miss his stories. I had a very similar situation and can relate so much. But it was of no fault but of my own. In junior high I was the joker of the classroom. I went to a small private school so all staff and students knew of my antics. My homeroom teacher didn't like it at all. This homeroom teacher would make an example out of me for any tiny infraction, giving me a lunch detention. The bonus about detention is you receive lunch for free. They make you PJ sandwiches served with a milk cartoon. So, each and every day for the next 2 years I received a lunch detention. Once in a great while the teacher would forget to give it to me and I'd remind her in front of the whole class. Thus, out of spite she would give me the detention. I sat in a climate-controlled room, normally by myself. Reading a book, loved when the book mobile would arrive, and pocketing the lunch money I was given every day, $4, and I bought many of NES video games thanks to the savings. Are you still living a life of crime or did you reform in college? This clever mother ducker is watching what the good people of r/Wall Street bets are doing, and making money doing the opposite. No way they reformed. A heart this criminally darkened can never shine purely again, or some such righteous bullshit. Seriously, OP, you're a ducking genius. The one, and only, time I ever got written up was in middle school over a stupid argument between friends. I was given 1 day on in-school suspension. They gave me my work from my classes at the beginning of the day, then sequestered me in a small room, all by myself. I finished the entire day's work within half an hour and broke out the current novel I had been reading. Lunch came and I was allowed to go to lunch, but had to bring it back to the room. I ate, took a nap on the floor and finished most of that book by the end of the day. The vice principal, the gatekeeper to the room, came and got me at the end of the day. She asked, in a very condescending way, if I had learned my lesson. I replied something along the lines of, "Yeah, I did. Today was the best day I've ever had here. I'd like to do this every day, maybe I should get in trouble more." To say the look on her face fell would be an understatement. I was honestly surprised she didn't faint, but she didn't, and told me that I wasn't allowed to keep the suspension going and that it was supposed to have been a punishment. I told her that when you don't like most of your classmates because they don't care and distract me from my lessons, this is a vacation. Coincidentally, about a month later an addendum to the student handbook was circulated detailing the discontinuance of in-school suspensions. I got suspended many times in high school for, drum roll, being late to school. So, to punish me for being late, they told me to not come to school.